Okay, so let me just start that presentation there. Hi, so I'm Andy Sanford, just going to do some quick coaching session today on basically sharing the process, how and why we'd share. Thanks a lot, Richard, for joining us to ask me the questions and let us know what you're doing. So, Richard, if you just wanted to introduce yourself and sort of say why you're interested in this stuff at this point and what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thanks, Andy, for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so we're at the stage now where we've mapped the processes for a particular service. We've done the as-is process maps and the to-be's. No service is really happy with it, but I want to send them the processes to get them to sign them off so we can just move forward into the next stage. And I just wanted to know a way in which I can do that without having to download every single process and give it to them in a PDF format. If there's a way, even though they're not maybe signed up to Engage, how they can access it through a more kind of slicker means almost.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a really good step forward, I think, in terms of the change agenda. You know, in terms of showing people a different way of doing things, actually sharing within the tool. You share to the stakeholders with a viewer user, so it's different permissions than you have, but it means they can actually see the maps, they can manipulate them, similar to what a modeler can do, but they can also comment on them. And
Okay.
you can react to that comments within the tool, so it keeps all the information against your process maps. So
Sure.
um, what I'll do is I'll step through why you might do it. So we've got a little bit of a presentation here, but a lot of it's going to be in the tool. So we're going to sort of say, why should we? You know, you've already given a great example there of why, when, and then really the core of it of how do we share. The bit of setup you've got to do with some users and groups, and then any permissions you might want to do, then actually sharing them, then actually looking at the feedback bit, and then stopping sharing any maps you've got.
Sure.
At the very end, I'm just going to talk about what we're going to do this summer with this continuous improvement coaching and running more of these sessions with the wider user base, but also talking about YouTube and things like that, and our fantasy football competition as well, which I know you're a discerning football fan, mate, having seen you at Paynor.
Absolutely.
So I know you've got good taste.
Don't know about that.
Oh no, I've said that, and you're in Exeter. Oh, that could be trouble. I
Oh.
apologise for that. I take it back, mate. You were shouting for the opposition.
In a difficult position now, Andy.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll flip through this quite quickly. So, why should we share? From my perspective, in terms of the tool, it's quite an important maturity step for customers. Obviously, you get loads of great benefits out of mapping the processes in the tool. But another productivity feature is this sharing, because you can actually publish and share these maps, send them back to the stakeholders. The wider group of people can look at them, they can comment on them. You can react to those comments, you can accept and reject them. They can look at the map from multiple different perspectives, just like you can in the modeler, but they can't change any of it. They can just comment on it. You can export those comments really easily, just like the maps. So it is far more productive rather than getting loads of random emails flying around. You get it all in the same place. More engaging for the stakeholders because they're seeing a digital process map and they can leave their feedback there. And again, it's backing up change and visible change because you are doing things differently and showing that you are doing things differently by sharing in a digital way, which obviously supports all the sorts of digital change initiatives that people are doing. So yeah, it saves you time, it speeds up delivery, and actually if you get better engagement from more of the people, you're going to get better process maps at the outset, you're going to get better feedback on improvement ideas, and therefore you're going to get better outcomes. So it's a bit of a virtuous circle thing to do. Next sort of step is, when should we share? Well, I mean, the reality is anytime. The obvious places where it always happens really is, I've captured an as is and I want to get that signed off. It's a bit like you're talking about, or we've now done an as is and we've done a 2B and we want to get some sign off and buy-in. If you've had some feedback and you needed to make changes to the maps, then you can share again. Also, if someone's raised a problem, you know, you've got an existing map and someone says, hey, we're having tons of problems with this new firm step form or whatever, you know, implementation there's been, how about publish it back out and sort of get people to comment and let you know where the problems are happening and what they're causing. Post implementation, so obviously we do a lot in the as is and 2B, which is capturing and improving, but then of course there's a situation where we're now going to implement something, so we want to share the new process out to everyone so everyone can use it. It can be a training tool, and again it can be your source of continuous improvement. So we're going to go through these few things in terms of it. It's not that hard, but obviously you're doing the modeler stuff all the time. You're doing the sharing as a one-off event, not as often as you're modeling. So that's why we're recording the video, so it's helpful for all customers. They can come back to this and refer to it. So we're going to go through setting up users and groups and just talking a little bit through that. Set up the permissions for them, because you can vary what people can see and do. And then we'll just go, then we're into just, hey, you've got your BA hat on, I've got my map, or I've got my brainstorm, or I've got my maps and brainstorms, and I want to publish them. So what are the actions I've got to do to share those processes out with the stakeholders? Then having a look at the feedback bit, and then just, you know, you've stopped sharing it because maybe the consultation period is finished and you're now moving on to the next step, so you want to stop. So that's kind of the full circle of what we're going to do. First bit we're just going to do in here, which is basically to talk about the one-off stuff you have to do as a system admin. So whoever you want to share with, you will need to set up a user for them in the system, and that user that you're setting up isn't normally a specific user. It's much more like, I don't know, who are you working with? Who are you trying to share with? What department?
It's the waste and recycling team.
Okay, cool. So yeah, waste and recycling would be the user. So you're not setting up each individual in there. You're actually going to set up a user for waste and recycling. You're going to add them to the viewer user group. And then we are then going to give them the permissions to do it. So the first thing we do as a one-off is, for you guys, you'd probably set up a viewer group. I've just called mine viewer. So that's just in the system admin area. Set up a new group, call it viewer, or viewer users, or whatever you want, you know, whatever your naming conventions are. That group is what we're going to apply the permissions to. So the permissions bit is a one-off. You apply it to the group, and then every time you're working with a new service, so say like planning or housing benefits, you'd set up a new user, put them into the group, they'd inherit the right permissions. So it's much easier the second time round. So you have to go in, set up a viewer user group, set up a new user, and I'd always suggest, in terms of setting up that new user, don't use a real email address. So don't use one that's like a public facing generic email address. Just make something up. In terms of first name, last name, you could make it waste recycling as first name, last name, and login, you can make it whatever you want. Waste viewer, if you want, at yourcouncil.gov.uk. Passwords wise, this is the thing the BA will need to know. They'll need to know the logon, so the email address and the password for the person. Because what we then do is we set up a nice link that means you can send it in an email to the users. All they do is click on the link and the link will take them direct into the maps you've shared. So it makes it really, really easy. So step 1, view a group. Step 2, set up the user. The most important thing to bear in mind with the user is at the very bottom there's an allow this user to change his password or their password that it should be. What you do with that one is take the tick out of there, because what you don't want to do is send the link to 20 people and the first one goes in and says, I'll change the password. So we take that away from them at this point. So all you do is take the tick out of that. They probably wouldn't find change password, but you know the rules, mate. I mean, if it's there, someone's going to find it and they're going to break that link for you. So better to switch it off. No major problem if you don't, because you can always go back in and reset password and send them another link. And the final thing you need to do after you've set up your user for your group of people, so the waste and recycling team viewer user, final thing you need to do is by default, when you actually set up a, bloody hell, my emails are coming through. I am going to, even though I'm recording this, I'm just going to stop that a second. And I'm getting notifications for no reason. That's brilliant. It's not even open. Oh well.
Can I ask something just quickly?
Yeah, of course, mate.
How do I get to the section to add these users or create these users?
Okay, that's a really good point, mate. Because I'm normally in the tool, so I'll actually just show you in the tool. What I don't want to do is go to the back end because I've got real users in there. So in order to do this setup piece, in the collaboration tab in the modeler, at the very far end, there is users and groups. And I'm hoping, have you got it? Oh, good. That means you've got the right permissions. So you click on there and it takes you to the back end, the settings area. Then you can just click create group and then create user and then do the config, as I said. So it's a fairly basic config. Set up the group, set up the user, take the tick out, don't allow them to change password, and then the last part you've got to do is just going back in here, is actually click on the actual user you've created and then use this. This is the view of what they've been allocated. Use this to assign and revoke. Didn't click, but you take away the modeler license because you don't want them as a modeler, and you give them a viewer license. Something to bear in mind for your modelers, you never need to set up a viewer user because they're a modeler. They've got viewer access, so you don't ever need to set up modelers with viewer access. They've got it. It's only with a new user here, it will default to modeler. So you just open up this bit about their license, assign, revoke, take away modeler, take the tick out of modeler, put the tick in viewer. And you're basically good to go then. So there's one final setup thing that we need to do in order to give this the right permissions to the group. We just need to do one more thing, and that is we need to actually go into the publisher area and do the viewer settings. So I've got a screenshot of it here, but I'll show you on screen. Makes this a lot easier so you can just go through again. So where you're in the modeler, go to the collaboration tab. Collaboration tab is where you would fire up anything. So you can see I've got viewer here, so you can click on that and fire that up, but we want publisher. So if you clicked on publisher, and I will just open up my publisher here, it'll open up a new tab for you and log you in, because it's single sign-on between all the modules in there. So we've opened up the publisher. The last thing we do, which is the general setup, is that we actually just need to go to viewer tab in here and viewer settings. And here is where we're going to now say my viewer user, I'm going to give them the permissions. So my viewer group, sorry, it's difficult with this user and group thing. Viewer group, so this is my one. The viewer group, I want to give them the right permissions, which is basically saying you're going to add every sort of service that you work with is going to get a viewer user to share their maps. You're going to add everyone that you do into this viewer group, which then means they're all going to get the same right permissions. Now, all you really need to worry about, the only one you have to do, is this one here called change preferences. So I take the tick out of change preferences for all of mine. What that actually means is it doesn't mean people can't move the maps around and put them in swim lanes and turn on the value and close windows and go to a different view. Doesn't mean that at all. What it means is when the first person does that and logs out, the system doesn't remember the config. It goes back to the default. So that's what you want. So basically everyone gets the same config that you've decided is the right one, the same initial view. Otherwise, if I messed around with it, closed a few windows, turned on all the wild and wacky things, and then went out and didn't have this tick taken out, it would, next time someone went in, give them that weird view, which is really no good for people. They need it simple, basic view. So I'll just go through some of the other ones, but like I say, personally, I never switch these off. I can see some of them you may want to because of, you know, being in your brand new swanky office and, you know, paperless and all of that lot. Potentially you might want to turn off print. You might say, I don't want anyone using any of the print functions out of the tool. So they can only look at it online. They can't knock it out. Personally, I don't change any of these because actually waste and recycling is a very good example. Sometimes the people you're sharing them with don't have access to the computers, you know, all of them. So maybe only some of them do. So maybe they need to print them because for them to be useful for them, they need to be printed and put up on the wall by the toolboxes or whatever. So, so you can stop them exporting, you can stop them printing, you can decide you don't want a navigation pane. Properties pane, you can take that away down the right hand side. Not a fan of any of these. Descriptions pane, so you can take away the broader description of what's going on in the step that's normally in the bottom left. Not allow them to access any documents that are linked to maps, not allow them helicopter view, and not allow them search. The only one I would consider probably for the odd process maybe I'm sharing outside my organization, I might turn remarks off, because as you know, the remarks pane in there is all your this is broken, this is our improvement ideas, that sort of stuff is what you're capturing in there. And occasionally you may decide I'm sharing with a group of people that we really don't want to highlight some of the challenges there are with the process at the moment. But generally, I keep them all switched on. Certainly that's my default, and change preferences off. And I don't worry about changing any of these. They relate more to where we're actually publishing a process handbook, which is going to be another webinar we do. So we've set up the user, we've given the viewer group, and we've given it the permissions. So we've taken away change preferences. We are actually now done with the setup, the one-off stuff that you have to do the first time you do this. And we're now into just what a BA would do now. So I will try and keep a pace to this, mate, as we are running behind somewhat. So we've now done those preferences. As I said, this will be recorded anyway and go on YouTube, mate, so you'll be able to refer back to this.
Sure.
Cool. So next step now is basically we'll go into the modeler. We'll now be the BA, and we're going to effectively do the 2 steps to sharing heaven, as I've put there. It's an incredibly marketing-y phrase, but you know, there's basically 2 things we need to do. We need to share it, and then we need to create this link. And you'll see in this second window here, we are putting the username and password in so that we're generating a link that we can just put in an email and say, here you go, here's the output of the workshop, please give us your feedback, click on the link to access it. And we're also going to do a video, a dedicated, very short video like this for customers to just use, so that they can send a simple video to people that say, hey, you've got a link to a process, here's how you can manipulate that process, move it around, look at swim lanes and leave comments. So into the modeler now, we're just going to do this. So hopefully if you are going through one at the moment, you'll have a process ready. I suppose the thing that I would say with this is it's processes, it's brainstorms, it's whatever you want to share. And in order to do the sharing, we're in the collaboration tab here. So in the collaboration tab, first thing I need to do is say, right, I want to share some stuff now. So whatever one is highlighted, it'll automatically default in the first dialog box. So if I hit share now, the dialog box comes up and it's basically giving me all of my processes that I've got in this project and all of my brainstorms. So just in my project here, I've got a series of processes and brainstorms, and the dialog box basically, when I say share, gives me all of those. The default ticked one is always the one that's active in the window, so you can do multiple ones at a time. If you've got, you know, a number of things you've completed in the workshops, they're all ready to go back for sign off or comment, you can do that. So tick the ones you want, click next. Describe what's changed in these diagrams. So there's a what's new button in the viewer, and that presents in a number of views. So this is basically a bit of a narrative for you to say, you know, we've had the as is workshop, here is the outputs, please feedback, you know, that sort of stuff. So just something to say, this is the status of it. And that'll obviously not only show in the viewer, but then when you're looking back at versions and things like that, you'll also be able to see in the history. And I'll show you that in a second. So I'm just going to say, so this is coaching demo sharing process, just for the sake of argument. So when I hit OK to that, it's now going to take me to the dialog box that says, hey, okay, great. Who do you want to share this with? So a couple of things you can do here. Obviously, you're going to want to add user and group. because you're trying to share with somebody. Mine's already got one in there, but I'm going to add that view. I'm going to add one of my viewer users in here and try and remember the password. So I've got viewer here. Now I'm going to try and remember what on earth I set that up as username. Okay, so I've added them. Now that I've added them, the blue bar is highlighting them. I have basically two options. I can either send it to them and it's shared and they can look through it, but they can't comment, or I can put the tick in feedback, which is much better for me, which means they will then be able to use the comment function in there. So I click OK, and that is actually shared already. So the first step shares it, the second one. So if the person knew their username and password and knew it had been shared, they could go and log into the viewer and access it now. But we're going to make it really easy for people. So we are going to create a viewer link. And this is just saying, okay, we've shared that one. Now we're going to give that group of people a viewer link. First thing at the top, you've got a published or shared link that you're creating. We'll do publishing in another webinar. This one, we've shared it because we pressed share. Publishing, if you press submit, it goes to the publisher. So share is what the BAs do. It's the sort of temporary one. Publishing is the process handbook. So I'm going to put a username and password in here and hope that I have it right. There's a chance, there's always an off chance. So I'm going to use my viewer user, and the password I'm going to hope is correct. So I've put the username and password in there, and we're going to do the belt and braces approach of checking this, because I hate to send things back to people and then it bounces back and they can't access it or something. So the first one to do that is to press the test link button. And oh, thank God for that. I've got the right username and password. So I've hit test link, the machine is tested, this is a valid link, something's been shared to it, the person has the right access, the username and password match up. You can get various errors there that will basically normally be related to the username and password isn't right. So the second belt and braces test for me is I'm going to copy that to clipboard. And I'm going to go into a different browser, and the different browser is the important thing. So if you go into the different browser, because obviously if you're logged into Engage already, you're logged in as you. I just need to open a new window for that one. I was lucky I didn't boot myself out of Hangouts there. So I'm actually going to do this one now, so Control V and paste it in and just test it, and that should take me straight in, log me into the viewer, take me to the process map that I just shared, which was misbins as is. And all the time I'm saying this, I'm thinking, God, be nice. There you go. So I know this works.
Brilliant.
So that one has worked. I'm 100% sure the link's correct. I'm 100% sure when I send it, people will get into it. So all I would do now is your usual stuff. You go into your emails, eventually, and start an email and say, here you go. I won't put a real email address in there, but you know how to enter an email address.
You hope so.
Never assume, mate. I never assume. Outputs of workshops.
Very true. Very true.
So I would just do it like that and say, here is the outputs.
Yeah.
Click
Okay.
the
Because
link.
no, I was about to ask the email you put into the system. That's just a fake email essentially, and then just to get the link to be created, and then send it to
And the thing
the
is, the
proper email
reason I
after.
say
Okay.
make it a fake one is because there are notifications that can be sent out. And I didn't show you that, but I will go back to that in a second. There is a feedback notification list. So I would always, obviously use the link function because it's not a pretty link that comes out of it. So just use the link function. There you go. You can send that to whoever was in the workshop and whoever needs to see it. I mean, the people in the workshop, I always ask them to introduce it to their colleagues and share it with them and get them to feedback as well.
Yeah.
Which is always good practice. So that's it. It's shared, really. You've
Okay.
sent this.
Cool.
It's shared. People can go in and access it, and they can then start leaving comments. So I'm just going to drop back because I did forget one thing in there whilst we were doing this one, and that was just within share. Okay. When we get to this part, there is a feedback notification list. So this is a list of people that will get an email when anything is added, any comment is added to the map. Now, I always say to people, think about who you give this to, because if you're getting 50 comments on a map in a week and everyone's getting all of those notifications, it's very, very spammy, mate. So for me, if I'm the BA, I would possibly put myself in there, but I'm not 100% sure because I'll probably give people a week to review it, and then I'll close it, and then I'll review all comments together. So it's up to you, but I certainly wouldn't put everyone in it because they'll just be getting tons and tons and tons of emails going. Richard said this, Andy said that, So it's there though. You can use it, and it's obviously quite nice because you as a BA, you want people to have commented, so you want to know they've interacted a bit.
Yeah.
So just going to go back to the PowerPoint to quickly refresh myself and put myself on the track. So we've shared it and created that shareable link. And now we're going to get people to go in and start to feedback, and also to actually, so they can start to look at the map in a different format as well. So I think I've got a few slides here. So down the right, so the first one is they get lots of options. They can put it in swim lanes. They can turn on or off value add, inputs, outputs, all sorts of stuff they can do. They can do quite a lot of what the BA can do. In fact, probably like 90% of what the BA can do, except update. Obviously, my main use for this is gathering the feedback. So you'll see we're in the comments tab now with the viewer, and you'll see there's all this feedback down the side. Obvious advantage of that is that you're getting the feedback on the process maps where you've got the ideas. The color coding down here, the blue ones are just comments that have gone on. The red ones are comments that have gone on but have been rejected. The dark green one there is a comment that's gone on, it's been accepted, and then there's a secondary status after that, which says it's been implemented, so you made the change in the map. And there's a light green one for those ones that they've been accepted, but they haven't yet been implemented. So you can, people can leave their comments. You can then get back together as a group and you can work through those comments and discuss and agree what the shape of the final map is going to be. You can also export those comments into various formats, and I think I've got a couple of examples coming up of that. So you can click on the chevrons beside the comments. So where there's a chevron, you can click on this and it'll open up the comment history there. So you can see comment was, "You were very, very wrong. Try to do better. I agree." And it's been implemented, and it's got date stamps, time stamps. And as you can see here, this is just the simple PDF export, but you can also export into Excel, you can export into Word. So you can really capture all the feedback you've got, dump it into Excel, and then you've got workable stuff in there if you want to use it. This one is just showing the statuses of the feedback that I've already talked you through. So the red being rejected, and green, dark green being accepted and implemented, and blue being new comment, no other activity. And you can see the chevrons to open up the wider conversation in there. So I'll just quickly, because this is the last slide, I'll just go back into the tool and just show you what your users can do in the viewer. And this will be a dedicated webinar in itself, a short one, just to show people, hey, you've had a process, what can you do now? So you'll be quite familiar with the format. The windows, as you know, they can move around and they can drag and drop, and, you know, like I say, I've closed those ones off. This is all why you don't want to change, allow change preferences, because I could come in now, I could switch on these and switch on value add and inputs and outputs and put it in a swim lane. And next person comes in, it suddenly looks, you know, quite a complex beast all of a sudden, and you're like, oh wow. So the whole idea of that one change that we made was that we bring all of that out. If I go out now, it'll go back to default view. So lots of manipulation they can do. Just going to go back to normal view now. Probably should have turned off text blocks before I shared it, but that's a good thing to say, just to emphasize the point that whenever you share, what gets shared is exactly the view you've got in the modeler when you share it. And it's a point in time share as well. So you can share this, and in the modeler, you can still be working with the comments and updating the map, but this shared version will stay the same until you go through that share again and send it back out, and it will supersede the one that's currently shared. Final thing, probably most importantly, I mean, obviously they can mess around with the views, the various different view spaces, process, document, showing any windows. You've got a nice little helicopter view down here, which means you can drag the window around and see the process, because as you know, some processes get incredibly large. Most important one for me that I want them to do is comments. And really, comments are very easy to use when you know how, obviously, like everything. What's new in this version? That'll pop up my little thing. There you go, coaching demo sharing process. That shows me that. Great. And I can then say I want to see comments that are currently live on there. And also, maybe I want to make a comment. So I'm going to say on this step, actually something's wrong with that, so I'm just going to make a comment and say this is clearly not correct, please update it. You know, it should be meaningful, hopefully giving you a clue as to what is not correct. Down here, because you're sharing with a group, it will default to the normal user, but people can update it and say that's comment by Andy. And I can also take the tick out of it's only related to a step. So at the moment I clicked on a step and did that. But if it's something that applies to the whole map, I can take that tick out. And that's a comment added. And you see it's popped up down the side here. Even your viewer users can export the comments, you know, if they want all of the stuff out for some reason. Obviously, it's all stored in the system, but if they wanted to, they can just do an export. Say, I'll take that into Excel as an example, and that will give me those comments that are there out into Excel. That's quite a lot of comments, but there you can see.
Okay. Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, and likewise, mate, you've got, you know, just as you know with the process, there's all different sorts of exports. With this, you can also just, you've got 3 different types. So Excel, you want them to work with. Word and PDF will give you an image-based export. PDF obviously is giving you scant protection, but some protection from anybody changing it. Then last couple of things I'm going to say in this one, and hopefully it all hangs together and makes sense, but going back in here, obviously the next sort of thing you kind of think about is I need to stop sharing the process. But also I'll just show you, before I do stop sharing, I'll also show you how me as the modeler, who's in charge of this, could go in and react on those comments. So I'm going to go back into my actual environment and I'm going to start to work. So this is me with my BA hat on, just as you are at the moment, mate. You're waiting to share stuff. I'm just going to go into analysis mode because that puts the right pop-up windows there for me. And then I'm going to work with the comments. So show comments. There's only 4 there because I had this open. So comments are gone on. I had it open in tandem. So if I hit refresh, you'll see my new comments up there. This is clearly not correct. So I'm going to say Andy's an idiot for this particular one. So I'm going to highlight that one and say, actually, no, I'm going to reject that one. It is correct. We discussed it as a group. Sorry, we can't change. And that will now update that one to red, as you can see. And if anyone logs in now to the shared one, they would see it as a red comment. But like I say, often I will be dealing with all the comments with the group back together anyway. So I might wait a week and not touch them because obviously it's not my process. I'm the one who's captured it. We need to get the group's view. I can, you know, accept that one and it will turn light green. And then when I've actually done it, I can hit implemented and that'll turn it dark green. So you can see some of the status and how you as the BA can work with the comments, which is always good practice. You know, you've got comments, really, they all need some sort of response to close them off, even if that's just saying, we can't do anything about this in this particular phase of the project, but we've noted it and we'll look at it at the next iteration of the process.
Okay.
Final thing to do is, if I ever wanted to stop sharing this, I go back to the collaboration tab and in there is a publications overview, and in there I'll see this particular process. So there is the one I've shared, highlight it, and then I can just click stop sharing. That's no longer a published link and it's no longer there for anyone to work with. So that, mate, is pretty much all I was going to do in this particular webinar, other than just to pick up at the end, just to reiterate what we are doing in the next month is obviously this one. I will try my best to hope it's recorded all the way through, and I will chuck it up onto YouTube so that it's there for other people. I intend to run this one with a wider audience as well. And we're going to do more sessions, and I'd like people to feed into what they want as well. But what I'm thinking off the top of my head, the next natural step after this one is making a process handbook. So that's much more about making a nice, easy digital handbook that people can click through, see their processes. So it's much more about when changes are implemented and you're back into business as usual with the process. You publish it into the handbook. New entrants can go and look at it. You know, people in customer service who want to know what happens later in the process can go and look at it. And people can feed back improvement ideas using the same sort of feedback function. We're going to do another one, best practice tips and tricks. So maybe some of the stuff people aren't quite using yet. I mean, obviously we had a session recently with you and the other guys in Devon and Strata, and looked at some of the tips and tricks. So we'll do something on that. But also to look at just a general sort of Q&A session and hopefully get some sharing and collaboration across organisations going in that one. So that'll be much more free format. But the plan would be to run a bit of a Q&A at the end of most of them, and then maybe some stuff on lean or lean startup or GDPR or anything else that people sort of come up with, really. It's all part of our plan to help customers be a success with the software, because actually what works for us and what works for customers is if we can get people using the software to the best of it, of their ability and the software's ability, they get more productive. Like I say, some of it's about the change stuff as well, and stakeholders seeing a new way of working. So we're going to do lots of these things and local meetups as well. And then we're going to be sending a newsletter shortly, which will have fantasy football competition in there, bit about user meetups and discount code for BA Conference Europe, which is in London, and some other stuff that is just worth pointing out to people, like the Engage user meetups in London and Edinburgh. So yeah, that's it, mate. Is there any you got any questions? You got any thoughts about what you'd like to see, or you know, any predictions for the season ahead for the National League? Only yellow teams allowed.
No, you know what? I think you know. Firstly, with this, it's all been very clear. So thank you very much. And I think, with regards to questions moving forward, I think as you know, we move the tool, as we use the tool moving forward, and you know, get to grips of it on a more complex scale, I think more things will arise from there. So I think it's just a case of, you know, continuing to use it. I mean, it's worked really well. It's gone down a treat here, to be fair, in terms of just getting people's heads engaged into what they actually do on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to, oh, you know, we always do it this way. Well, sit down. Do you actually do that? So it's worked fantastically so far. So yeah, looking forward to rolling it out across the services, really. So yeah, I think as we start to, you know, use it and see its full capabilities, I'm sure more questions will arise. But I feel the next steps you've got there, all things which will be really useful. So I look forward to seeing them as well.
Cool. We've also got a Slack channel that I made a while ago, which I'm going to relaunch. But the problem I had with the Slack channel, and this may make you giggle a little bit given our earlier frustration and challenges, was that it's not universally accessible to public sector organisations or even private sector. Some people can't get to it, even though there's loads of local government collaboration and government collaboration going on there. Yeah, I don't know whether you guys can access, but I won't ask you, mate. You don't need to commit on a video. But if not, I'm going to work out another way. If it has to be a LinkedIn group, which isn't quite as good, I'll set up one of those instead, because I just want to create that forum for users to talk to users, as well as to talk to us, and as well as to talk to the guys in Holland. And then we can identify where we need to go to help people get more out of it. So this is the first of many of these. And hopefully they helped. I appreciate your feedback and your time for this one, mate. You've been my guinea pig.
Thank you.
I'm glad it made some sort of sense to you. Well, until next time, mate. Thank you very much for your
Brilliant.
time.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Richard.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, mate.
Take care. Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye, mate. Bye.